10. Black R&B queens who had secret musician relationships to become famous. What if I told you that some of the most celebrated R&B queens didn't rise to fame through talent alone? Behind the lights, behind the Grammys, behind the platinum records, there were whispered relationships, silent bargains, and power games that rewrote music history. Diana Ross, Whitney Houston, Janet Jackson, Beyoncé, and more icons we adore may have carried secrets never printed on album covers. These are not just love stories, they are survival stories in a ruthless industry. Are you ready to uncover what fame really cost them? Hit like, share, and subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence. The truth starts now. Diana Ross. Diana Ross's journey from a Detroit teenager in the housing projects of Brewster Douglas to the shimmering queen of Motown is one of music history's most celebrated stories. But beneath the glamour there exists a complicated layer of whispers, power struggles, and intimate connections that shaped her career in ways the public still debates today. Ross joined the Primettes in 1959, a girl group that would later become the Supremes when Motown Records signed them in 1961. At first, they were not the label's darlings. In fact, Motown insiders jokingly referred to them as the no-hit Supremes because their first 6 singles between 1961 and 1963 failed to chart. But by 1964, everything changed. The group skyrocketed to #1 with Where Did Our Love Go, followed by Baby Love and Come See About Me. Suddenly, Diana Ross was at the forefront. Many observers began to notice something unusual. Florence Ballard and Mary Wilson had equally strong voices, yet Diana was pushed relentlessly into the spotlight. This coincided with her increasingly close relationship with Motown founder Berry Gordy. The two eventually had a daughter together, Rhonda Ross Kendrick, born in 1971, although for years the paternity was shrouded in secrecy. Gordy later confirmed the relationship in his autobiography To Be Loved, admitting the deep personal connection that blurred professional and private lines. As Ross transitioned from the Supremes to her solo career in 1970, Motown invested heavily in her debut, including her first solo #1 hit, Ain't No Mountain High Enough. This marked a level of support rarely afforded to departing group members. Industry analysts at the time pointed out that Ross's recording budget, promotional campaigns, and crossover appeal to white audiences were unmatched among her peers. Was this purely because of her extraordinary charisma, or also because of who stood behind her? Do you believe Diana's rise was only talent, or did her closeness with Gordy tilt the balance in her favor? Throughout the 1970s, Ross became a multidimensional star, branching into film with Lady Sings the Blues, 1972, which earned her an Academy Award nomination, and later Mahogany, 1975. Yet her artistic triumphs continued to be accompanied by talk of favoritism and special treatment. Mary Wilson, in her memoir, Dream Girl, My Life as a Supreme, recounted how painful it was to watch Ross consistently elevated while the rest of the group faded into the shadows. By the time Ross left Motown in 1981 for a then record-breaking $20 million contract with RCA Records, she was already cemented as a legend. But even her exit reflected the duality of her story. Gordy, once her mentor and partner, had nurtured her career, yet she was determined to prove she could stand independently of his empire. Ross's legacy is dazzling: over 100 million records sold worldwide, 12 #1 hits with the Supremes, and 6 as a solo artist. She received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2016 and remains an enduring cultural icon. Yet the debate persists. Did her personal relationship with Berry Gordy provide opportunities that others never received? Or was she simply the most undeniable star of her generation, destined to rise no matter what? Her story captures the painful paradox of black women in the music industry of the 1960s and 70s. To shine under the brightest spotlight, many had to navigate a world of invisible bargains. Diana Ross chose silence about the rumors, often deflecting with grace whenever pressed about her past. But her knowing smiles in interviews seemed to suggest she understood the weight of those whispers. Ultimately, Diana Ross's career illustrates both triumph and cost. She became the face of Motown and an international star, but her rise left behind questions that may never be answered fully. Fans continue to love her music, yet in the echoes of those backstage corridors, the complexity of her ascent lingers, reminding us that stardom often comes with shadows the audience never sees. Aretha Franklin. When people hear the name Aretha Franklin, they immediately think of power, power in her soaring gospel-infused voice, power in the anthem. Respect that defined a generation and power in her decades-long reign as the Queen of Soul. But behind her unmatched artistry lies a more complicated tale, one where music, gender, and power politics collided in ways that were rarely spoken about in public. Aretha was born in 1942 in Memphis, Tennessee, and raised in Detroit, the daughter of the famous preacher C.L. Franklin. Her childhood was filled with gospel greats. Mahalia Jackson and Clara Ward were regular guests in her home. By the age of 14, she had already recorded gospel music and toured with her father's revival shows. Yet when she transitioned into secular music in the early 1960s, her career did not immediately explode. Her first label, Columbia Records, often placed her in jazz or pop arrangements that failed to showcase her raw gospel strength. Between 1960 and 1966, she recorded 9 albums, but not one gave her the iconic status she craved. Everything changed when she signed with Atlantic Records in 1966. With producers Jerry Wexler, Arif Mardin, and Tom Dowd, Aretha released I Never Loved a Man the Way I Love You in 1967. The album's title track went to number 1 on the R&B chart and top 10 on Billboard Hot 100, followed quickly by Respect Chain of Fools and You Make Me Feel Like a Natural Woman. In the space of 2 years, Aretha Franklin had become a household name. But insiders at Atlantic often whispered that Aretha's sudden transformation from struggling jazz singer to unstoppable soul icon didn't come solely from a change in musical style. According to industry accounts, Franklin had unusually close relationships with several Atlantic executives and producers. Jerry Wexler, in his memoir Rhythm and the Blues, admitted that his personal affection for Aretha went beyond ordinary artist-producer dynamics. While he never claimed romance, others in the industry suggested the late-night sessions. Private meetings and special attention she received were not extended to other singers of the era. Do you think Aretha's meteoric rise was purely timing and genius, or were backstage relationships part of the equation? The rumors hurt and fascinated her audience in equal measure. Many black listeners in the late 1960s wanted Aretha to be a symbol of independence and pure talent, someone who could rise without compromise. But others suspected that, like many women in the male-dominated music world, she was navigating an industry where power was often bartered in silence. These conflicting perceptions created both admiration and unease around her stardom. Despite the whispers, Franklin's career never slowed. She became the first woman inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1987. She won 18 Grammy Awards, sold over 75 million records worldwide, and was ranked the greatest singer of all time by Rolling Stone in 2023. Her influence shaped the sound of American music for more than 5 decades, from gospel to pop, from protest songs to love ballads. Still, she rarely spoke directly about her personal relationships with producers or label executives. In a 1970 interview, when asked about the rumors, she famously replied, "My music has said enough." That sentence encapsulated her lifelong strategy: let the voice carry the story while leaving the behind-the-scenes dealings in the shadows. Aretha Franklin's legacy is therefore twofold. On one side, she is rightly celebrated as one of the greatest vocalists in history, a woman whose artistry gave voice to the civil rights movement and female empowerment. On the other, her career is a reminder of how black women in the 1960s and 70s often had to navigate a music industry controlled by powerful men, where the boundaries between personal and professional were deliberately blurred. In the end, Aretha Franklin's triumph is undeniable. She became an icon not because of rumors, but because her voice was so commanding it couldn't be ignored. Yet those whispers remain part of her mythos, unconfirmed, unsettling, and inseparable from the truth that in show business, talent alone rarely determined who reached the throne. Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston's rise in the 1980s was like a meteor streaking across the night sky, brilliant, unstoppable, and unforgettable. Born in 1963 in Newark, New Jersey, into a family deeply rooted in music, her mother, Cissy Houston, was a gospel legend, and cousins Dionne Warwick and Dee Dee Warwick were already established artists. Whitney seemed destined for greatness. But destiny alone does not explain how she became one of the most decorated and recognizable voices of all time. Behind her pristine image and otherworldly vocals were stories of backstage relationships that blurred the line between mentorship and intimacy. Her big break came in 1983 when she was signed by Clive Davis, the powerful head of Arista Records. Just 2 years later, her self-titled debut album, Whitney Houston, 1985, produced 3 #1 singles, Saving All My Love for You, How Will I Know, and Greatest Love of All. It became the best-selling debut album by a woman at the time, moving over 22 million copies worldwide. Such a meteoric ascent was nearly unprecedented. Inevitably, questions arose. Was this purely the power of her voice, or also the result of Clive's extraordinary backing? Industry insiders noted that Davis gave Whitney resources far beyond the norm: prime television appearances, international tours, and songwriters who rarely wrote for newcomers. The two were often seen together at private dinners, on late-night phone calls, and on business trips where only they were present. While officially described as a mentor-protege relationship, the closeness sparked constant whispers about whether professional decisions were entangled with something more personal. Do you think Whitney's unparalleled rise was just talent meeting opportunity? Or did her closeness to Clive Davis tilt the scales in ways others never experienced? The rumors carried a heavier weight because of Whitney's unique position. She was often criticized within the black community for being too pop or not soulful enough, with critics suggesting her sound catered more to white audiences than traditional R&B fans. Her association with a powerful white executive like Clive Davis only deepened this divide. Some saw her as betraying the raw essence of black soul music, while others sympathized, understanding that a black woman in the 1980s music industry often had to grab whatever lifeline was available to survive and thrive. Yet even amidst controversy, Whitney's artistry silenced doubters. Her second album, Whitney 1987, debuted at #1, making her the first woman in history to achieve that feat. From 1985 to 1988, she scored 7 consecutive #1 singles on the Billboard Hot 100, a record that still stands today. By the early 1990s, with I Will Always Love You from The Bodyguard, 1992. She achieved one of the best-selling singles of all time, topping charts in 25 countries and selling over 20 million copies. Still, the whispers never faded. In a 1988 interview, when asked directly if Clive Davis was the man behind her every decision, Whitney simply replied, "Clive is the one who understands my music the most." It was both an acknowledgement of his influence and a refusal to address the deeper speculation. That ambiguity allowed the rumors to linger for decades. Her legacy today is bittersweet. On one side, Whitney Houston is celebrated as perhaps the greatest voice of her generation, a 6-time Grammy winner with over 200 million records sold worldwide. On the other, her story reflects the painful truth that in the entertainment industry, power is rarely just about contracts and talent. Intimate relationships, whether rumored real or exaggerated, often determined who soared and who remained in the shadows. Whitney Houston's brilliance cannot be denied. But when her voice fills the room, many still wonder, was her stardom built only on the purity of that golden sound? Or was it also shaped by whispered nights and decisions made far from the stage lights? Gladys Knight. Gladys Knight, often celebrated as the Empress of Soul, possessed one of the most resilient voices in R&B. Her career spanned decades, from gospel choirs in Atlanta to Grammy-winning performances on global stages. Yet her path to stardom was not free from the invisible machinery of Motown, a system where personal ties, power plays, and whispered bargains often determined who endured and who faded. Knight began singing at just 7 years old, winning Ted Mack's Original Amateur Hour TV contest in 1952. With her siblings and cousins, she formed the Pips, later renamed Gladys Knight and the Pips. They signed briefly with Motown in 1966, joining a roster dominated by the Supremes, the Temptations, and Marvin Gaye. Unlike Diana Ross, Knight was not immediately positioned as Motown's crown jewel. But with hits like I Heard It Through the Grapevine, 1967, and If I Were Your Woman, 1970, she carved out a space often competing with the label's biggest stars for attention and resources. Insiders recounted that Motown functioned like a palace with velvet curtains and hidden rooms. At lavish after-parties, executives decided which artists would get prime recording slots, which singles would receive heavy radio promotion, and which groups would be quietly sidelined. Gladys Knight's name often appeared in those whispered stories, her presence at private gatherings raising speculation about the price she might have paid to keep her group on the priority list. Do you think Knight's longevity was purely the result of unmatched talent? Or did strategic relationships behind closed doors also play a role? Unlike some of her Motown peers, Knight was never given the same budget or marketing muscle. Yet she remained competitive, and some believed that beyond her vocal strength, her ability to navigate the label's politics ensured her survival. In her 1997 memoir, Between Each Line of Pain and Glory, Knight acknowledged the challenges of working under Motown's hierarchy, though she avoided directly addressing the persistent rumors about private arrangements. The Pips eventually left Motown in 1973 for Buddha Records, where Knight finally achieved the recognition Motown had withheld. Midnight Train to Georgia, 1973, became her signature song, winning the Grammy for Best R&B Vocal Performance by a Duo or Group. Over her career, Gladys Knight collected 7 Grammy Awards, sold millions of records, and was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1996 with the Pips. Despite her success, the shadow of Motown's unspoken culture never left her story. Fans adored her elegance and dignity on stage, but colleagues remembered how survival often depended on accepting unspoken rules of access and proximity to power. The tension between her image as a gracious, church-rooted vocalist and the persistent backstage gossip created a paradox. She represented purity in sound. Yet her climb was marked by the compromises many female artists of her generation were forced to consider. Today, Gladys Knight is rightly revered for her artistry. Her performances of Neither One of Us and Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me remain timeless. But the unrecorded fragments of history, nights in smoke-filled Motown backrooms, selective opportunities granted to some but not others, still linger as part of her legacy. Gladys Knight's story, then, is both inspiring and haunting. She outlasted many of her contemporaries, maintaining relevance for more than 6 decades. But she also embodies the uncomfortable truth that even the most soulful voices had to move through an industry where music was not the only currency. Chaka Khan. Few voices in R&B and funk carry as much fire as Chaka Khan's. Born Yvette Marie Stevens in 1953 on Chicago's South Side, she rose from the Civil Rights-era Black Panther Party to the dazzling stages of international stardom. Dubbed the Queen of Funk, Khan's career was marked not only by her explosive vocals, but also by a series of stories and rumors suggesting that behind her independence stood silent negotiations and compromises rarely acknowledged in public. Her breakthrough came in the early 1970s as the lead singer of Rufus, a band whose blend of funk and soul electrified audiences. With Khan's powerhouse voice front and center, Rufus released Tell Me Something Good in 1974, written by Stevie Wonder. The song won a Grammy, and suddenly Khan became the face of the group. But within Rufus, tension brewed. Some band members felt overshadowed, whispering that she was receiving preferential treatment not just because of talent, but also due to her connections with influential figures at Warner Brothers. The rumors centered on late-night meetings in Los Angeles and industry parties where powerful producers decided which voices could step beyond their groups into solo superstardom. By 1978, Khan released her first solo album featuring the hit I'm Every Woman. Her solo trajectory seemed almost inevitable, but insiders suggested it was greased by more than just musical brilliance. Some accounts claimed she leveraged private relationships to convince executives she deserved the spotlight alone away from Rufus's constraints. Do you think Chaka's leap from group singer to solo icon was purely artistic destiny, or did unseen backstage alliances help unlock those doors? What sets Khan apart from many of her peers is her candor. Over the years, she has admitted the struggles she faced: substance abuse, financial chaos, and the constant fight to control her artistry. In interviews, she stopped short of confirming the whispers about how her solo career was negotiated, but she did once remark, "I did what I had to do for my music to be heard. No one knows all the choices I faced." That enigmatic statement fueled speculation, leaving fans and critics to wonder what she truly meant. Her career numbers speak loudly. Chaka Khan has won 10 Grammy Awards, 22 nominations, sold an estimated 70 million records worldwide across solo projects, and with Rufus, and influenced generations of artists from Whitney Houston, who covered I'm Every Woman, to Mary J. Blige. Her ability to blend funk, soul, jazz, and pop made her one of the most versatile artists of her time. Still, her story carries the weight of the industry's double-edged sword. As a black woman trying to carve out independence in the 1970s, a decade dominated by male producers and executives, Khan faced choices that male counterparts rarely encountered. The unspoken expectation that women would barter more than just music for opportunity loomed over her path. Today, Chaka Khan stands as a survivor. Inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2023, after decades of eligibility debates, she remains a symbol of resilience. But the legacy of whispered meetings, shadowy arrangements, and sacrifices behind studio doors lingers, adding a complex layer to her brilliance. Chaka Khan's journey shows us that independence often comes at a price. She broke free from the confines of a band, fought personal demons, and built a solo empire. But with each triumph came speculation about what was exchanged in the process, leaving fans to wrestle with the haunting truth that behind every anthem of liberation, there may have been a silent compromise. Tina Turner. Tina Turner's name evokes images of blazing energy legs, pounding across the stage, hair flying, and a voice so raw it could tear through the air like lightning. Born Anna Mae Bullock in Nutbush, Tennessee in 1939, she rose from humble beginnings to become the queen of rock and roll. But her climb was not only about musical genius, it was also entangled with a controlling partnership that shaped, restrained, and nearly destroyed her before she ultimately broke free. Tina's career began in the late 1950s when she joined Ike Turner's Kings of Rhythm. By 1960, the two became the face of the Ike and Tina Turner Revue, delivering electrifying performances that combined soul, blues, and rock. Hits like River Deep, Mountain High, 1966, and Proud Mary, 1971, cemented their place in music history. But behind the spotlight was a darker reality. Ike controlled every part of Tina's career, from contracts to set lists, and has later revealed her personal life as well. Industry insiders during the 1960s often whispered that Ike leveraged his personal relationship with Tina to maintain dominance. In that era, for a black woman to gain entry to recording studios and national tours, proximity to powerful men often determined access. Tina was not just Ike's wife. She was also his artistic prisoner. Promoters and producers who wanted Tina had to go through Ike, and rumors circulated that professional opportunities were often linked to private negotiations that Tina endured in silence. Do you believe Tina's early fame would have been possible without her complicated bond with Ike Turner? Or was she destined to shine regardless? The price of survival was heavy. Tina later described in her 1986 autobiography, I, Tina, how she endured years of abuse, physical, emotional, and financial, because she feared losing her career if she left Ike. She admitted that some recording sessions and late-night meetings were framed as business, but in reality they blurred the line between contract and coercion. What audiences saw was a dazzling performer. What they did not see were the tears behind closed doors. In 1976, Tina made the boldest decision of her life. She walked out of her marriage with just 36 cents and a gas station credit card in her pocket. At first, she struggled playing Vegas shows and TV appearances simply to pay off debts. But her resilience rewrote the narrative. By 1984, she returned with the album Private Dancer, which sold over 10 million copies worldwide and earned her 4 Grammy Awards. For the first time, Tina was in control, not Ike, not executives with hidden agendas, but Tina herself. Her story became one of liberation. The very industry that once trapped her became the stage where she declared freedom. Songs like What's Love Got to Do With It carried deeper meaning, resonating not just as pop hits, but as testimonies of survival. In the decades that followed, she sold more than 100 million records, earned 12 Grammy Awards, and set records with sold-out stadium tours. Yet even as she reigned as a global icon, the rumors of what she endured to climb the ladder never faded. They remain part of her legacy, not to diminish her brilliance, but to highlight the painful reality of what many women in her era faced. Tina Turner's triumph is therefore twofold. She became one of the most electrifying entertainers in history, and she proved that even when fame is born in compromise, freedom is possible. Tina Turner's life is remembered as both tragedy and triumph, a reminder that some stars are not just born, they are forged in fire. Anita Baker. When you hear Anita Baker sing, it feels like velvet unfolding in the air, smooth, intimate, and unforgettable. Born in Toledo, Ohio in 1958 and raised in Detroit, Baker grew up amid hardship, losing her foster parents young and finding solace in church choirs. By the 1970s, she was already making her way into the local scene, but the path to recognition was neither simple nor transparent. Like many black female artists before her, Anita's rise carried whispers of secret meetings and unspoken compromises that would never appear in liner notes. Her early breakthrough came with the funk band Chapter 8, which she joined in 1975. They recorded a self-titled album in 1979, but when the label Areola Records was acquired, executives decided Baker wasn't marketable enough, leading to her dismissal. That rejection nearly ended her career. Yet in 1983, with the help of Beverly Glen Records, she released her debut solo album, The Songstress. Though modestly successful, it opened doors especially for insiders who claimed she had quietly navigated backstage negotiations to secure resources that were rare for young, untested women in the industry. The true breakthrough arrived with her 1986 album, Rapture, released under Elektra Records. The record sold over 8 million copies worldwide, and won her 2 Grammy Awards, including Best R&B Vocal Performance for Sweet Love. Suddenly, Baker became the face of sophisticated R&B, an artist who embodied elegance and maturity rather than pop crossover flash. But behind that elegance, there were murmurs. Critics pointed out that despite being considered too quiet for mainstream radio in her early career, she received unusually strong label support in the mid-'80s. How did that shift happen so dramatically? Do you think Anita Baker's success was the result of patient artistry finally being recognized, or did hidden alliances with industry power brokers help change her fate? Industry whispers suggested that her rise involved late-night studio sessions and private meetings with executives who saw in her not just talent, but also opportunity. Some producers allegedly favored her with songs and arrangements that could have gone to other singers. Though none of these rumors were ever confirmed, the stark contrast between her overlooked beginnings and her meteoric late 80s success kept speculation alive. Through the late 1980s and early 1990s, Baker became a household name. Albums like Giving You the Best That I Got 1988 and Compositions 1990 both went platinum, with the former debuting at #1 on the Billboard 200, an almost unheard-of achievement for an R&B record at the time. She won 8 Grammy Awards over her career, influencing singers such as Toni Braxton and Alicia Keys. Yet Anita herself chose silence when asked about the rumors. In interviews, she consistently redirected attention to her music. In one candid moment, she admitted, "I wasn't the obvious choice in the beginning, but I knew my songs had a place." That statement both dismissed and acknowledged the complexities of her journey, suggesting that beyond the music, other forces were indeed at play. Her legacy is layered. On one hand, she is rightly celebrated as one of the greatest R&B stylists of all time, a woman whose songs created a space for intimacy and emotional honesty in a genre often dominated by flash. On the other, her career reminds us of the uncomfortable truth that the industry rarely rewards talent alone. Often unseen relationships and strategic alignments play just as big a role. Today, Anita Baker is enjoying renewed recognition with sold-out reunion tours and her catalog streamed by new generations. But the quiet rumors from those smoky studio nights of the 1980s still linger, making her success story not only one of triumph, but also one of mystery. Janet Jackson. Janet Jackson's name today evokes independence, artistry, and control, but her journey to the throne of R&B and pop was neither smooth nor free from speculation. Born in 1966 as the youngest sibling of the famous Jackson family, Janet grew up in the long shadow of Michael and the Jackson Five. In her early career, she was often introduced as Michael's little sister, appearing in sitcoms like Good Times and Different Strokes, before releasing two modest solo albums, Janet Jackson, 1982, and Dream Street, 1984. Neither project gave her the breakout she needed. Many critics thought she might forever remain a supporting character in the Jackson dynasty. Everything changed in 1986 with the release of Control, partnering with producers Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. Janet redefined herself as an artist with her own sound, bold, rhythmic, infused with funk and new jack swing. Songs like What Have You Done For Me Lately and Nasty became anthems of female empowerment. The album sold over 10 million copies worldwide, earned her 4 Billboard Hot 100 top 5 singles, and established Janet as a force independent of her family. Yet alongside the applause came whispers. Industry insiders speculated that her late-night sessions with Jam and Lewis went beyond professional collaboration. The trio often worked until dawn in secluded Minneapolis studios where, according to colleagues, creative discussions blended with a personal intimacy that fueled both music and gossip. Janet herself never confirmed these claims, but the timing was suspicious to some. After years of mediocrity, she suddenly exploded into superstardom. Do you think Janet's leap from Michael's sister to global icon was purely the result of genius collaboration? Or did deeper personal bonds behind studio doors give her the push? The rumors intensified with Rhythm Nation 1814-1989, a socially conscious masterpiece that became the best-selling album of 1990 in the United States. It produced 7 top 5 singles on the Billboard Hot 100, a record unmatched by any album until then. Critics hailed her as not just a pop star, but a cultural leader. Yet whispers lingered. Private flights, hidden hotel meetings, and long absences explained only as creative time with her producers. For some, these were just the marks of hard work. For others, they were coded signs of more. Janet, however, chose to control the narrative. In interviews, when asked about her relationship with Jam and Lewis, she would smile and say, "Music is the only thing we ever stayed up all night for." A clever answer that neither confirmed nor denied anything, leaving fans and journalists to decide for themselves. Her career statistics underline her dominance: over 100 million records sold worldwide, 5 Grammy Awards, 11 American Music Awards, and induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2019. She remains one of the best-selling female artists of all time, influencing stars like Beyoncé, Britney Spears, and Ciara. But Janet's story is not just about numbers. It's about carving an identity in an industry that doubted her, surviving family expectations, and if the rumors hold truth, navigating complex personal alliances to ensure she got the platform her talent deserved. Her transformation from an underestimated girl into a fearless woman reflects both empowerment and the harsh reality of what women in music often endure. Today, Janet Jackson is celebrated as a pioneer, an artist who turned whispers into chart-topping hits and speculation into fuel for one of the greatest careers in music. But her journey also raises enduring questions in the battle for independence. How much was built purely on talent, and how much was paid for with silence behind locked studio doors? Beyonce Knowles Carter is today recognized as one of the most powerful entertainers on the planet, an icon of independence artistry and Black excellence. But her journey from Houston teenager to global superstar is interwoven with stories of control, favoritism, and whispered backroom maneuvers that critics still debate. Beyoncé was born in 1981 and trained from childhood in singing and dance. By the late 1990s, she had become the face of Destiny's Child, a girl group managed by her father, Matthew Knowles. Their debut album, 1998, sold over 1 million copies, but it was the follow-up, The Writings on the Wall, 1999, that pushed them to superstardom with hits like Bills, Bills, Bills and Say My Name. Yet behind their polished harmonies, the group was marked by sudden departures, lawsuits, and accusations of favoritism. Two original members, LaToya Luckett and Latavia Robertson, sued Matthew Knowles and the label, claiming they were unfairly pushed aside to favor Beyoncé and Kelly Rowland. Insiders suggested that Matthew made backroom deals with producers and executives, negotiating terms that placed Beyoncé firmly in the center, vocally, visually, and contractually. This fueled speculation that the group's path to fame was less about equal talent and more about power dynamics engineered behind the curtain. As Beyoncé emerged as the undeniable lead, she received more solos, more screen time in videos, and more interviews. Some fans began to question whether Destiny's Child was truly a group or simply a launching pad for Beyoncé's solo career. Do you think Beyoncé's central position in Destiny's Child was the natural result of star power, or was it predetermined by her father's strategic maneuvering? In 2003, Beyoncé released her first solo album, Dangerously in Love, featuring hits like Crazy in Love and Baby Boy. The record sold over 11 million copies worldwide, won 5 Grammy Awards in one night, and erased doubts about whether she could succeed outside the group. Still, the whispers persisted. Was her rise inevitable because of raw talent, or because her father had orchestrated every move from the beginning, sometimes at the expense of other young women's careers? By the late 2000s, Beyoncé began to shed her father's management. With Bidet, 2006, and I Am, Sasha Fierce, 2008, she asserted more creative control. Her marriage to Jay-Z in 2008 only deepened her cultural footprint, with the couple becoming a symbol of wealth, influence, and Black excellence. Yet even as she broke away from Matthew's management, the early Destiny's Child controversies remained a wrinkle in her legacy, a reminder that her empire was built not only on brilliance, but also on painful sacrifices within the group. Her career numbers today are staggering: over 200 million records sold worldwide, 32 Grammy Awards, the most of any artist in history, and tours that gross hundreds of millions of dollars, including the Renaissance World Tour in 2023, which earned over $579 million. She has built Parkwood Entertainment, her own company, to ensure that no one else dictates her career. Beyoncé's story is one of dualities. On the one hand, she is the embodiment of female empowerment, telling women everywhere to take control of their destinies. On the other, her beginnings remind us that even the most independent icons sometimes emerge from systems shaped by favoritism, manipulation, and unspoken compromises. Today, Queen Bey stands at the top, a cultural force unlike any other. But her path leaves us with a lingering question when greatness is born from both raw talent and contested beginnings. How do we measure the true cost of the crown? Mariah Carey. Mariah Carey's story is often told as a modern fairy tale. A young woman with an extraordinary 5-octave range, rising from obscurity to become one of the best-selling artists of all time. But behind that brilliance lies another narrative, one of control, hidden bargains, and a marriage that many described as both protective and suffocating. Born in 1969 in Huntington, New York, Carey grew up in a multiracial household that often left her feeling like an outsider. By the late 1980s, she was working as a demo singer in Manhattan when her tape landed in the hands of Tommy Mottola, then CEO of Sony Music. The story goes that Mottola was so captivated by her voice that he turned his limousine around to track her down at a party. What followed changed pop history. Mariah signed with Columbia Records, a Sony subsidiary, and in 1990, her self-titled debut album produced 4 #1 singles, including Vision of Love, a song that redefined vocal standards for a generation. Yet from the beginning, her career was tied tightly to Mottola, who became both her label head and by 1993 her husband. He was 20 years her senior, and their relationship quickly became known as the Golden Cage. Mottola ensured Mariah had access to the best producers, writers, and marketing budgets resources that helped her dominate the 1990s. Between 1990 and 2000, Carey achieved 15 Billboard Hot 100 #1 hits, more than any other artist in that decade, and sold over 150 million records worldwide. But success came with strings. Industry insiders recalled that Mottola tightly controlled her image and even her personal life. Friends were reportedly screened calls monitored and projects filtered through him. In her 2020 memoir, The Meaning of Mariah Carey, she described the marriage as oppressive, saying she felt like a prisoner in my own home. Though their relationship was often presented as glamorous in the press behind the scenes, it blurred the lines between partnership power and possession. Do you think Mariah's early dominance was purely the result of unmatched talent, or was it inseparable from Mottola's influence and control? The cracks began to show in the mid-1990s. Carey longed to experiment with hip-hop and R&B influences, collaborating with artists like Old Dirty Bastard and Jermaine Dupri. Mottola resisted, preferring she maintain her innocent pop diva image. Their creative clashes mirrored their personal struggles. By 1997, the marriage ended, and Mariah finally began reshaping her career on her own terms. Her freedom, however, came at a cost. The late 1990s and early 2000s brought turbulence. An overworked Carey suffered a physical and emotional breakdown in 2001, and her film Glitter flopped critically and commercially. Yet she rebounded spectacularly with The Emancipation of Mimi in 2005, which sold over 10 million copies worldwide and earned 3 Grammy Awards. Today, Mariah Carey's legacy is monumental. More than 200 million records sold, 19 Billboard #1 hits, the most for any solo artist, and induction into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 2022. She remains a symbol of resilience, blending vulnerability with dominance in a way few artists ever achieve. But the shadow of her early years persists. Her golden voice soared from the start, but her path to the top was bound by a gilded cage that forced her to trade independence for opportunity. That paradox lingers in every conversation about her. Mariah Carey is both the embodiment of pure talent and a reminder of how the music industry often cages its brightest stars. Behind every dazzling note sung by these R&B queens lies not only raw talent, but also whispers of sacrifice, power, and survival in an unforgiving industry. Their voices shaped generations, yet their journeys remind us that fame is never free. It comes with shadows the public rarely sees. Some argue these women were simply unstoppable talents, while others believe hidden alliances shaped their rise. But what do you think, were their crowns earned purely by genius, or were they forged through silent compromises? Share your thoughts below and subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence for more untold stories.